glad you're with us this first Sunday of the year and looking forward to what 2025 has to bring for all of us. We're starting a new series appropriate for new things at the new year. And as kind of already been introduced to you at the earlier part of the service, we're calling it Rest of Your Life. We're talking about rest. We all need that, but we're also talking about the rest of your life. We'll concentrate probably a lot of it on the rest part of it. And I hope you have a Bible, and if you do, would you open the pages up or power it up or whatever you need to do and get to Matthew chapter 11. That'll be our text this morning. Matthew chapter 11 will be there in just a few minutes. But to kind of set the tone for us, to help us for that, maybe just by show of hands, you let me know if in the last couple of weeks you have felt something like this, okay? Maybe it was over the holidays, maybe as you're preparing for the new year, maybe it's just every day of your life. But if you have felt stress in the last couple of weeks, just by show of hands, would you let us know that? Okay, most of you in here, a few of you know, I don't ever deal with stress. Okay, if you have felt in the last couple of weeks somewhat hurried, at some point during the last couple of weeks hurried, okay? Or if you have felt anxiety over something, doesn't mean you have anxiety, but if you've been anxious about something, would you, okay, maybe not as many. How about if you have felt pressure at all, felt pressured, pressure to make a decision, pressure to do something, okay? Or lastly, if you have felt like burdened about something, felt a burden, pressed to do something, okay? So I think we're all talking kind of the same thing. We've all experienced those things even in the last couple of weeks. I think we live in a culture that is chronically exhausted. We just live with stress, and we live with worry, and we live with anxiety, and we live with burden, and we live with being tired, and we just kind of get maybe used to that, and there's times where it seems overwhelming to us, and other times we just seem to, put up with it. Heard about a man who was struggling with exhaustion. He told some friends he felt this way, quote, "a diseased bundle of nerves." In a letter trying to diagnose the source of his anxiety and his weariness, he shared about how many people he knew, he said this, were struggling with the effects of addiction to stimulating substances, sensational news stories and entertainment, the frantic pace of commerce and high-speed communication, noise pollution, and the constant pressure to organize work and travel on an exacting schedule. Anybody feel that? Can you say, I've been there before? Okay, here's the deal. This was written by Henry David Thoreau in 1845. Right, isn't that crazy? 1845, pretty long time ago, and yet almost some of the stuff that we would say, I feel like that could be something from today. Or another guy named Thomas Kelly said, "Our lives grow too complex and overcrowded. Even the necessary obligations which we feel we must grow overnight. Before we know it, we're bowed down with burdens, crushed under committees and commitments, strained, breathless, and hurrying, panting through a never-ending program of appointments. We are too busy to be good partners to our partners, good companions to our children, good friends to our friends, and with no time at all to be friends to the friendless." Thomas Kelly wrote that in 1941. So 80-something years ago, right, and 100-and-something years ago, these things are being written. But I suspect probably more than then, more than ever, we live in a culture of exhaustion, where we're just chronically tired, we're stressed, we're constantly hurried, we're overwhelmed by life's demands and pressures. And so what we do is we dream of vacations, right? We're going through all this, and we're like, I can't wait for the next vacation. When are we planning the next getaway? When are we going to go away for a long weekend? When are we going to get away for a while? We dream of a next day off, or we dream of, maybe you did this last week or in the last couple of weeks when we had the billion-something dollar lottery. If I just won the lottery, then I wouldn't have to deal with any demands of life. Everything would be good. I wouldn't have to worry about anything, and I could get done everything that I've got to do. And so we dream about these things. We think that'll fix it. And there's some reasons for it. I think sometimes it's because we're in a difficult season of life. Maybe that describes where you are right now. Sometimes we feel like we just can't slow down because of the stage of life we're in. Like maybe you're a single mom and you've got all this responsibility and you're taking care of the kids and you barely have time to breathe besides do anything for yourself. Or maybe you're a divorced dad and you're holding down a couple of jobs trying to make ends meet. Or maybe you're the person who's caring for aging parents right now and at the same time trying to raise your children, and you just are stressed, you're overwhelmed all the time, you never have a minute to yourself. Or maybe you work for a boss who's so demanding that it's not possible for you to get done all the things that he would ask for you in any given day. And then you add to whatever situation you're in, the demands of just regular life and the household chores and, again, taking care of yourself and all of those things. And so for some of you, it's season of life right now. And sometimes we know that there's going to be an end to that. We power through it. We figure it out. And things are going to get better. But for some, it's not because we can't slow down, but it's because we don't want to slow down. In fact, for some people, I think being busy and hurried and all of that, it's almost like a badge of honor. It's almost like our culture has raised up this status of busyness, and we've got something going on, which we attach to that then that I must have some significance. I must be doing good. I must be doing something right. And so I'm busy. We say that to people. We feel good about it. I'm just so busy right now. Like I'm really accomplishing something. And maybe you're wired that way. Just some people seem to be. That's when you thrive, is when you've got lots going on. Maybe you're wired that way, and that's fine, at least until you approach a time where you're dealing with borderline burnout, or maybe you're finding from a spouse or from your kids or from somebody else that there are some misplaced priorities in your life, and then it becomes a little more apparent. Or for some, you can't slow down because you've got control issues, okay? Don't nudge anybody right now. We'll just kind of deal with that in private, okay? Some of you got control issues, and that's the case. You think if I don't do it, then it won't turn out the way that I want. And so what happens is then you're constantly, you're always doing it because it's got to be you that's doing it. For others, here's the issue. Slowing down would cause you to have to think. It would cause you to have to reflect, and it would cause you to have to evaluate some difficult relationships or maybe some difficult realities. And the honest truth is, it's easier for you just to be really, really busy than to have to deal with all that stuff. And so we fill up life with things so I don't have to really deal with life. And for some of us, we just really don't know how to do it, how to slow down. It's something that we never really learned. Nobody spent the time to talk about how to live at a sustainable pace of life. And so we just kind of get caught up in all this and we're busy and we don't know how to manage that. The result is still the same. No matter why you're there or no matter what the reasoning is behind it, the result is the same. It causes us to live these hurried lives, and it causes us to deal with these things, and it causes us to live life in such a way that it really is at odds with the ways of Jesus. Maybe you've never thought about it that way before. Jesus was never hurried. Jesus was, it seemed, never stressed or, anxiety-ridden about anything. And so when we live like that, we're actually living differently than Jesus. It affects us, but it also affects our witness to the world as followers of Jesus. I mean, how can we present Jesus as desirable when we ourselves are exhausted and stressed and worn out like everyone else? I mean, that doesn't make sense. That really doesn't help anybody else. Maybe there's sometimes people look at Christians and go, I don't really want to live like that. It seems like you're busy. You got stuff going on all the time. Which brings us to this invitation of Jesus in Matthew chapter 11. All the way down at the end of the chapter. Can we just kind of focus on this for a minute? Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you, what's the word? Come to me, Jesus says, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Man, I like that. He goes on and says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble heart, and you will find what? Rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And we like that passage. My guess is you probably are familiar with that. If you grew up going to church, if you've read your Bible, you're familiar with that terminology right there. Come to me, all you are weary. You know what it's like to be weary because you've already raised your hands to that. We know what weary means. It means to be tired after working hard. It means after you've gone through some stuff, you're tired because of that. Burdened, then, is beyond that. You can be weary, but to be burdened has even more. Like this stuff is mounted up on me. In fact, I've got a picture I want you to see that the word in here actually kind of points to that. It's the picture of a pack animal, right? Like in olden days when you traveled, you would put your baggage, you would put the things that you needed, you put your supplies on this, whatever it was, a donkey, an oxen, or whatever, a horse, and they would carry it. We have pickups now, and we have SUVs, and you can get trailers. That's how you pack around your stuff now. But there was another day, and when Jesus used these words, people would have thought, oh yeah, a pack animal, a beast of burden. That's the kind of thing that we would have in this picture that would come to mind. And so if you feel weary, if you feel loaded down by burdens, Jesus says, then come to me and I will give you rest. Notice what Jesus doesn't say. Jesus doesn't say, come to me all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I just might give you rest. He doesn't say that. Jesus doesn't say, come to me all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and if you do things just right, if you kind of meet certain parameters, certain things, then rest will come your way. Jesus doesn't say that. It is a promise from Jesus. It's a promise that if you come in this way, this is what I have to offer you. I will give you rest. Who wouldn't want that, right? And we read this and like, sign me up. Everybody's going to want this deal right here. In fact, the very next verse tells us how to find the rest. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we really like this first verse, the verse 28. Come to me, I will give you rest. How do we get the rest? Jesus says, take my yoke upon you. I've got another picture for you. It's a picture of an old-fashioned yoke. This would have been something that would have been used during Jesus' day, something similar to this. In fact, it's used even in third world countries right now where they don't have, machinery and farm implements like we're used to. It was a tool that was used where a farmer would put two strong animals together. They would be side by side. They would use the obvious loops in there, whether those were of wood or leather or rope or whatever they were. And he would put these two strong animals and they would pull together. Now they would attach something else to it. There in that middle ring, they would attach maybe like a plow to it. And so you've got two oxen who are pulling a plow, working together, pulling it through the field. Now here's what a good farmer would do. He would avoid putting two mature animals together. Why would he do that? Because two mature animals would fight against each other. They both think they know what they're doing, and so they would fight. Wouldn't work well together. So what a farmer would do is he would put one who was more mature and one who was younger and less experienced. And the older one, who was likely stronger, the older one who was likely more experienced, would help the younger one to kind of reach a sustainable pace. So the younger ones want to go, want to push against the yoke, going to want to take territory. And the older one would help approach it at, again, a sustainable pace. And so a good farmer would do that. Now, maybe like me, you've read this promise back in verse 28. I will give you rest. And you've thought, Jesus is saying, I'm going to give you rest like a day of relaxation. I'm going to give you rest. I'm going to give you a rest like a day on the beach, sipping a cold drink, watching the waves come in. I'm going to give you rest like a day off. I'm going to give you rest like a day without work. I'm going to give you rest like a day without kids. How about that? I'm going to give you rest like a day without any cares. Maybe you've, like me, thought, well, that's rest. When I don't have to do anything. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to eat for the next meal, right? What restaurant are we going to go to? That's a vacation, right? That's rest, right? Well, actually, it sounds a little more like a Sabbath. The Bible talks a lot about a Sabbath or a Sabbath rest. In fact, it's a biblical term that we know of, that you stop what you're doing. You cease from your labor for a short period of time so that you can put your thoughts on God. And so the Bible talks about it. In fact, Jesus recommends we take a Sabbath rest. The Old Testament says, thou shalt keep the Sabbath. Last year, we walked through the book of Exodus, and we talked about the multiple times that God points out for his people, keep the Sabbath day holy. Was that for God's benefit? No. It was for his people, his creation. It was for their benefit that they would learn to walk in this rhythm of rest that God actually had modeled for them in creation. Take a day off regularly. In their case, it was every week. You're going to take that seventh day off, and you're going to stop from doing anything else and help put your attention upon God. What's interesting is, if you were to read into the next verses, obviously reading into chapter 12, if you've got it open, kind of browse through there, Matthew is going to tell stories about the Sabbath. I don't think it's an accident that Matthew is connecting these dots for us. I think he goes right into Sabbath stuff to continue to talk about this idea of pausing or rest for us. And he tells the story about Jesus' disciples walking through a field, and they began to pick grain. Not a big deal, wasn't against the law in those days. You could eat, people were able to eat by doing that. What was not good and what they got called out on was because it was the Sabbath day. And there were Jewish leaders that said, you can't do that. You're harvesting on the Sabbath day. And Jesus then has to go back and tell a story about King David and God providing bread from them from the temple in a way that, was a little undocumented and a little different. So then Matthew tells another story. It's about a man who's in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, probably not the same Sabbath day, but again, Matthew's lumping it all together. This man has a shriveled hand, and Jesus heals the man. And again, the Jewish leaders are like, you can't heal on the Sabbath day. That's working. You're not supposed to work. It's a day of rest. And Jesus, again, has to help them understand the Sabbath wasn't just some random thing for God, and we have to fulfill all of these requirements, which, by the way, they had come up with all kinds of things that you had to do and to not do to keep the Sabbath. Jesus says that's not what it is for the benefit of man. So Matthew is making sure we understand there's a time of rest. There's a period where we cease from our labors, but that's not what he's talking about at the end of Matthew. Because a yoke is not a tool of rest, is it? A yoke is not something you take home and use as a pillow. A yoke is a tool of action, a tool of movement, a tool of progress forward. So here's what Jesus invites us to do. When we are weary, when we are burdened, we are to take on Jesus' yoke. In other words, we are supposed to place ourselves next to Jesus and become the younger, less experienced co-laborer. We are to take Jesus and let him have the lead, let him help us carry the burden, let him guide our steps. We are invited here in Matthew 11 to walk alongside Jesus and learn a sustainable pace of life. So let me just kind of word it this way. If you need a statement, this would be it. Jesus gives us rest not by ceasing from doing anything, but by inviting us to be yoked with him. See, we want to jump to the not doing anything. When I'm tired, when I'm weary, I'm a heavy burden, I'm like, sign me up for a day off. Sign me up for vacation. Jesus says, here's where rest comes. Not when you stop, although you need a rhythm of stopping. Jesus would absolutely say that's what we need. But he says, if you want real rest, here's where it's come. Be yoked up with me. Jesus says, because my yoke is easy and the burden is light. But at the same time, in the previous chapter, Jesus says, take your cross and follow me. Now, wait a minute, that seems like opposite things. Take up your cross, follow me, take up your yoke because it's easy and light. And what Jesus, again, is inviting us to do is to take up something that isn't necessarily, when he uses the word easy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's effortless. He's saying it's appropriate. Take my yoke because it's appropriate. It's good for you. And so here's what I want to pose for you. What if the fix for our exhaustion, we've all admitted it, what if our fix for exhaustion isn't another vacation or another day off? I had people mad at me that are going on vacation this next week, okay? Don't be mad at me. If you're going on vacation, that's fine. If you got a day off tomorrow, that's fine. We need those things. But what if the fix for our exhaustion isn't what we think it is? What if it's not just that? Because Jesus says, I will give you rest. Oh yeah, take on the yoke of work. My yoke upon you. Doesn't make sense to us. And so what Jesus is acknowledging is it doesn't make sense, and it's not something that comes naturally. It's something you have to learn. Look at verse 29. You will learn how to do this. Yeah, I want you to learn how to take this yoke upon you. None of us want to do it. None of us like to do it. It doesn't make sense to us. In fact, it's something that has to be learned because you and I, we don't want to be yoked with anybody. We don't want that. We don't want to have to be dependent upon somebody else. We all want to drive ourselves so we can leave whenever we want to, right? You know, you drive with somebody, you're like, can we leave yet? I was hoping to be home by now. Can we go? We don't want to be yoked with anybody because it means that we lose our independence. We don't want people telling us what to do or when to do it. We want to do our own thing in our own way, in our own time because we like to be in charge. So how's that working for us? Doing our own thing in our own way, in our own time, being in charge. Can we keep doing it? Can we sustain that? Here's what we do. I do it all the time. I say it to my wife all the time. Well, once I get through this, then things are going to slow down. Anybody else use that line right there? Once I get through school, things are going to slow down, and then once I get that promotion at work, then, oh man, it's going to smooth out. Things are going to be much better. Once we get the little kids grown up, then things are going to slow down in our house. Once we get out of debt. When we get out of debt, things are going to be so much better. Life is going to be good. Once I get in a relationship or once I get married or whatever it is, I'll slow down and things will get better. And we kind of just tell ourselves those little white lies, right? And the thing is, that seasons of exhaustion quickly become a lifestyle. Because we get through the difficult situation and then all of a sudden we tend to find other things to fill the margin and to fill the energy void. And what Jesus is saying is we need to be yoked with him and to learn a more sustainable way. It's an invitation to be yoked with Jesus and move when he moves and slow down when he tells us to slow down. So here's the question I want you to think about kind of as we leave from here, looking forward to a new year. Is living every day yoked with Jesus currently what your life looks like? If you read Matthew 11, 28 to 30, and you see the invitation from Jesus, take my yoke upon you, does that describe your life as we've talked about what that means? Does it look like you? Is this how you live? Or have you been trying to accomplish everything in your own strength and to do it in your own time? Taking on the stresses and the burdens, or have you truly laid those before Jesus and said to him, which of these things do I need to really worry about, and which of these things do I just need to let go? What's on my to-do list that I really need to do, and which of it do I not need to do, right? Jesus, will you help me with that? Am I letting Jesus lead me truly, or am I doing my own thing? Am I trying to carry the burden by myself and do everything apart from him, or am I truly walking alongside of him? I'm yoked with him. Listen, you can get away with living for a while, doing it your own way, but eventually that's going to come back, and you're going to be in a spot where you're like, I can't do this anymore. Why am I doing this that way? And when I begin to yoke myself with Jesus, I start to resemble him. I start to look like him. I start to act like him. I start to bear fruit of the Spirit like him. Like when it says to us in this passage, he's gentle and humble in heart. Well, you know what? If you're stressed and overwhelmed, oftentimes you are no longer gentle and humble-hearted, right? And so am I looking like him? You know the 23rd Psalm. We could probably quote it here together and get most of the way through it, but I want you to think about the first line there. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. Or if you learned it in the old King James Version, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. It means the same thing. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. I'm completely content. I mean, that's what we all want, isn't it? We want to be at the place where I don't need anything. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. But those two phrases that we just read, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, they're not just random. They are very much tied together. They are connected. I lack nothing. Why? Because the Lord is my shepherd. And the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I lack nothing. To have the Lord as my shepherd is to have everything I need. I don't have to worry. I don't have to stress. I don't have to be overwhelmed because I have everything I need. The Lord is my shepherd. The psalm goes on to talk about what the shepherd provides, and one of the things that he provides for the sheep is rest. Verse 2, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Did you know that sheep have to be made to lie down? They just don't do it naturally. They'll bounce all over the place. They get lost all the time. That's why Jesus told stories about finding the lost sheep, because it's just bouncing around, going on. And a good shepherd will make sure the sheep are well fed and then lie down in green pastures to give them rest. Now, here's what the really cool thing is. King David writes that psalm, and then 1,000 years later, Jesus shows up and he says, I'm the good shepherd. Almost as if he's saying, you know that good shepherd that David wrote about, Psalm 23, you all know it? Yeah, that's me. And if you have me, you lack nothing. You're going to want to lie down. You're going to want to rest. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. That's a picture of Jesus right there that helps us. There's another picture from that line we just read. Jesus says, because I'm gentle and humble in heart. Revelation chapter 3 is a part of a long series of things where Jesus is talking to some of the churches of Asia. To the church in Laodicea, he says this, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and lets me in, I will come in and I will dine with them. That's a pretty cool invitation right there, isn't it? Pretty good picture of Jesus. Now, what you need to know is Jesus is talking to the church. He's not talking to people outside the church. That's often how this gets presented. Listen, if you want to know Jesus, he's quietly knocking at your heart and wants to come in and be a part of your life. No, he's talking to the church people right here. And he's saying, I'm knocking at the door. But it gives us a picture of Jesus. He's gentle and he's humble in heart. He's not going to knock the door down. He's not going to force the yoke upon you. He's gentle and humble hearted, and he wants to pull alongside of you, and he wants to help you, and he wants to walk you through this. The invitation of Jesus is, come to me. If you're weary and you're heavy burdened, because he wants to give you rest. He'll give it to you. So, what if, here we are looking at a new year, everything before us, new year. Some of you haven't been to work yet, new year. Some of you haven't gotten out of your pajamas yet this week, new year. Okay? What if every day in 2025 you woke up and you said, Jesus, I want to take on your yoke. I want to walk alongside of you. I want you to teach me. I want you to guide me. I want you to lead me. I just want to take on this yoke. What if every day in 25? What if you're single? And what if every day in 2025 you said, Lord, I want to take on your yoke, and I want you to teach me what to live in 2025 that's not married, what it looks like to date, what it looks like to have good relationships. I'm going to let you teach me. I'm going to let you lead me in that way. What if in 2025 you took on Jesus' yoke as a parent? And instead of you going, how do I want to raise my kids? You said, Jesus, what do you want for me? What do you want for my kids? Not for what I want for them, but what ways do you want me to lead them and for them to go? Well, what if those of you that are married, every day in 2025, Jesus, I'm going to take on your yoke, and I want you to help lead me. I want you to help me serve my spouse. I want you to help me do what's right. I don't know everything to do. I don't know how to do everything, but I'm going to take that yoke, and I'm going to let you lead me and guide me and teach me. What if, as an employee, as an employer, as a small business owner, what if every day in 2025 you just said, Lord, would you help with this? I'm going to take your yoke upon me, and I'm going to let you help me walk through this and know what I need to know. If the symbol of our salvation through Jesus is a cross, then the symbol of our surrender to Jesus would be a yoke that we read about in Matthew chapter 11. Jesus is gently leading us. He wants to guide our steps, and he wants to help us. But we have to choose every day if that's where we're going to be, if we're going to take on his yoke and we're going to learn to walk with him. I think this invitation in Matthew 11 reminds us that real rest, the kind of rest that we all truly want, real rest comes when he is in charge. Listen to these words from Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his book, The Cost of Discipleship. Only the one who follows the command of Jesus single-mindedly and unresistingly lets his yoke rest upon them and finds their burden easy. And when it's and under its gentle pressure receives the power to persevere in the right way. The command of Jesus is hard for those who try to resist it, but for those who willingly submit, the yoke is easy and the burden is light. I'm going to ask the band to come up and just begin to get ready as we sing another song in just a minute. But here's what I want you to do. I want to give us just a little bit of space. Again, looking forward to a new year. And just in a kind of a prayerful tone, can we just ask God to do some things that He's promised He'll do in this invitation? And then maybe we make some promises that we'll do some things that it talks about here as well. So an easy way for us to do it, let's just bow our heads, let's close our eyes for just a minute, and let's just kind of think through this again. Are you overwhelmed? Exhausted? Tired? The invitation from Jesus, the one who keeps His word, is come to me, and I will give you rest. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Would you take Jesus up on His word right now and ask Him for that rest that you need in your life? Would you just talk to Him about that? Maybe tell Him what's stressing you out, what's worrying you, what's got you anxious, what's keeping you up at night, what's bothering you. Would you just tell Him that? And would you ask for rest from Him as He promised? And would you prayerfully right now think about what that means for you on a regular basis to do what Jesus says, to take His yoke upon yourself. Maybe for you, that's in practice like we're doing right now, to give Him the first day of your week. And just say, I'm going to be around some people and I'm going to hear some things from your word. Maybe it's to say to Him, I'm going to give you the first part of my day, and I'm going to open up your word, and I'm going to spend some time in prayer with you. Maybe it's to say to Him, I'm going to give you first consideration in any decisions that I make. And so, Lord, would you help me? I take your yoke up on me, and I need you to teach me, lead me, guide me through today. You just talk to Him about what that means for you regularly this year. Jesus, we thank you for this invitation, one that seems too good to be true, but one that we so desperately need. We need true rest. And Father, we've looked for it in lots of different places, things that we've talked about, trying to seek out just a reprieve from the experiences that we have. And it's possible that we have not found that true rest because we've looked in the wrong places. We want to be yoked up with you, Jesus. We want you to lead us. We surrender to that this year in your name.